Okay, first up is cross-site scripting. As we talked about in a previous video, a cross-site scripting attack is a technique that is used to hijack sessions. So it can be non-persistent, such as an email or a blog post, or it can be persistent, which is server-based, where an attacker doesn't need to actively target a user. All right, so as I mentioned, non-persistent, specially crafted URLs. It could be sent in an email, an instant message, a blog post, and so forth. It could be DOM-based or document object model-based, which can be persistent or non-persistent and can also be used to hijack sessions. And then we also have persistent, which is server-based, that a user can, or a malicious attacker, I should say, can post something, can attack a website, a blog post, or somewhere where it's sitting there and it's just there persistent. As soon as someone visits that page or loads that specific piece of content from a server, then that script is executed remotely on their system. So the actual attacker does not need to be actively targeting that user, in other words. All right, so if we look at this in a little more detail, we have an overview of an attacker. We have the user's browser, a malicious script, the attacker server, and a legitimate server. And as you see here, it starts off with the attacker constructing a malicious link. They're going to send that to the user, all right? Whether, again, it's an email or instant message, in some fashion, they're going to get that URL to the victim and then convince them to click on that link. And that's where the trouble begins. All right, so from there, that link, once executed, will request a page from a web server. All right, goes out to the legitimate server, requests that web page. The web page is returned with that malicious script, and then within the user's web browser, that script is run. All right, so at that point, as I mentioned, the user is sent an email, contains a malicious link. The URL is then sent to the legitimate site along with malicious code, which is then executed in the user's browser. So it has the context and the authority or the permissions of that user. Another option, or another way to look at it, would be a cross-site scripting with an unauthorized request, which is the same type of attack, but it gives some additional parameters that is not necessarily present in the previous example. In this one, a user sent an email containing a malicious link, as we talked about before, and they're convinced in some fashion to click on that link. The URL is sent to the legitimate site along with the malicious code, which then executes in the victim's web browser. However, there's an additional component here. Once that happens, that malicious script, depending upon what it is, can then generate additional requests coming, as it would appear, coming from that user to the legitimate server. Those additional requests could post data to other parts of the sites, or to the website rather, or it could do some other actions on behalf of that user without the user being aware that those requests are being sent. Okay, that's the key takeaway here. When we're doing this unauthorized request, that script will continue to run or continue to function and send additional unauthorized requests to that legitimate web server.